that I did lean on a lot when I was writing Amongst Women is this passage about time, and it also deals with Moran, who is in a tyrant in one sense, but his actual reality is much more complicated like that, because he sometimes can be very charming, and his daughters especially love him, and like all tyrants, they're almost grateful for any relief. So his charm is actually much more powerful than a person who might be all the time charming, because he's not a charming man. And the two girls come home in this little passage from Dublin because their brother has finally left the house, and they think that he's going to be very upset by this, but much to their surprise he accepts it. And this is the passage around that. He drives them to the station at the end of the stay, and he says, "I'm thankful for all you did for Michael." He surprised them by saying as they waited in the car outside the railway station the next evening, "We're sorry we couldn't get him to come home," Mona mumbled. "I know you did your best. That's all anybody in the family can do." On the platform, he kissed them as the train drew in. They told him they would be down again before very long. The two sisters were silent as the train crossed the Shannon, travelling through fields. As the train was pulling into Drummond, the small platform black with people like themselves returning to Dublin at the end of the weekend, Mona said in an emotional voice, "No matter what they say, Daddy can be wonderful." Sheila nodded her head in vigorous agreement. "When Daddy's nice, he's just great. He's like no other person." And even the small white stones under the lights on the station platform took on a special glow. Moran went out to the road and closed the iron gates under the yew after returning with the car from the station. He listened for the noise of the diesel train crossing the plains behind the house, but it had already passed. The light was beginning to fail, but he did not want to go into the house. In a methodical way, he set out to walk his land, field by blind field. He had not grown up on these fields, but they felt to him as if he had. He had bought them with the money he'd been given on leaving the army. The small pension wasn't enough to live on, but with working the fields, he had turned it into a living. He'd be his own man here, he had thought, and for the first time in his life he'd be away from people. Now he went from field to field, no longer kept as well as they once were, the hedges ragged, stones fallen from the walls, but he hardly needed the fields anymore. It did not take much to keep Rose and himself. It was like grasping water to think how quickly the years had passed here. They were nearly gone. It was in the nature of things, and yet it brought a sense of betrayal and anger, of never having understood anything much. Instead of using the fields, he sometimes felt as if the fields had used him. Soon they would be using someone else in his place. It was unlikely to be either of his sons. He tried to imagine someone running the place after he was gone and could not. He continued walking the fields